Good evening. Hurricane Andrew is about 600 miles due east of Miami. It's moving west at about 15 miles per hour. Maximum winds are about 100 miles per hour, and a hurricane warning is in effect for the northwestern Bahamas, and a hurricane watch is in effect for the Florida coast from Titusville south through the Keys. Residents of this area are advised to keep abreast of events. This is Jerry Gerald from the National Hurricane.
All right, Jerry, we'll be back with you in just a few minutes. What they do at the top of every hour so that all stations around the state or in the affected areas can take it is they have one feed that everybody takes, and then we'll go back and we'll be able to talk to them directly. Let's go down to Jerry Gerald at the National Hurricane Center. Jerry, we've been showing them the 5 o'clock information, 100-mile-an-hour winds, moving west at 15, and are right on track. Any change in the track or the speed at this point?
No, it's holding steady, and every hour is getting it 15 miles closer to us. And I don't see any reason to think that's going to change appreciably. Of course, we're not targeting this area, but it's getting closer to the coastline.
Right. The idea is that this high-pressure ridge at the top, I mean, everything is sort of fluid here within a little bit of flexibility, and I guess it doesn't take much of a difference, much of a variation to make quite a difference when it gets to the coast. That's
right. A few degrees now in direction could hit on either end of this watch area.
Now, we've been saying, and I want to hear from you guys down there, that the anticipated point to put out the warning would be first thing in the morning, everything staying the same with the rate of advance of the storm here, and the speed and everything else being basically the same. Is that correct, or would you put it out sooner?
Our thinking is on the fast end of that speed is that we'll have to do it at 5 a.m. on the 5 a.m. advisory. If it's a little slower, then we'll probably do it on the next advisory, which would be at 8 a.m.
All right, but certainly tomorrow morning, we anticipate that somewhere on the Florida East Coast a hurricane warning will be issued.
That's correct.
All right. Everybody, and Jerry has asked this question because we've had a lot of viewers. I know you get this kind of question. Surely something is going to happen to make this thing turn to the north. I've done my part to say that we don't see it here in the Storm Center. It's your turn to say what you feel. The likelihood is anything coming along here that is going to make this storm not affect Florida directly.
Well, we don't see anything, and Brian, the reason we do the watch is an area that we think the risk is big enough that you ought to be doing those things that people are doing and that some of your listeners are not doing, that you really ought to be laying in those supplies. The watch the risk is high enough to justify that.
Okay. All right, Jerry, we'll be back with you, and we appreciate the good work done there.
The latest coordinates for 11 p.m. for Hurricane Andrew, 25.6 degrees north latitude, 71.9 degrees west longitude. And this position is 520 miles east of Miami, Florida. Now, the hurricane has slipped just a little bit south the past few hours, a couple of 1/10 of degrees, but basically it's continuing on a due westward course at about 14 miles per hour. The wind speeds have picked up. We are now indicating 110 miles per hour for the maximum sustained wind. As the storm moves west, we have a hurricane warning up for the northwest Bahamas, and we have a hurricane watch up for the Florida East Coast from Titusville southward through the Keys. We possibly will be putting up a hurricane warning for some portion of Florida on Sunday morning. As the storm moves westward, we expect the hurricane conditions to affect the Bahamas tomorrow and somewhere in Florida on Monday.
Live down there. All right, it's Max. Max, I wanted to check in with you here. You have constant monitoring of the storm from aircraft, and we've noticed a little bit of a turn to the south, just a slight deflection to the south. Do you think that's a permanent deflection, or are we just going to talk about a westward movement here?
We're continuing to talk about a westward movement. It's been about a 0.3 of a degree southward shift in the past 6 hours. Not enough to get too excited about, and all of our guidance models suggest a due westward course over the next couple days. So we're going to stick with that due west for a while longer.
Now, I noticed on the satellite picture over your shoulder there, and also on the ones we're showing here, I'm seeing some of the cloud bands already approaching the Bahamas. Now, that's not the storm so much as just cloudiness. Is that correct?
Right. Now, there could be some showers in those bands, but we do have the hurricane warning up for the Bahamas, so it will not be inappropriate for them to start getting some severe weather tonight and tomorrow.
All right, now how far in advance of the storm can we expect here tropical storm force winds, because we know that many plans cease operation, evacuations and boating and all that kind of thing, cease operations at the time of the 39 or 40 mile an hour winds. How far ahead of the storm can that be expected?
Well, the tropical storm force winds extend out from the center of the storm, possibly out as much as 100 miles, maybe a little less than that. And so at 14 miles an hour, we might be talking about 5 or 6 hours before the center reaches you that tropical storm conditions could begin.
So clearly tomorrow is our day to take whatever action we're going to take, because if you take your 520 miles here and you divide out the 14 or 15 miles an hour, you can see that the winds would be, and then subtract off the 5 hours, we're talking about significant winds here by Monday morning. So tomorrow is the day we need to take all action, right?
Tomorrow's the day. I'm putting up my window shutters tomorrow morning.
You and me both, Max. All right, we'll be back with you here. We're going to be here and try and answer as many questions as we can for as many viewers as we can, and we'll check back in with you. Thank you.
Hurricane Andrew is located a little over 500 miles east of Miami, Florida at this time. It is moving due westward, about 14 miles per hour. Highest winds are 110 miles per hour. They've picked up a little bit, and there is a potential for continued strengthening during the next day or so. We have a hurricane warning up for the northwestern Bahama Islands. We have a hurricane watch up for Florida from Titusville southward through the Florida Keys. We will probably be putting up a hurricane warning for some portion of the watch area in Florida on Sunday morning.
Center in Coral Gables for an update from forecaster Hal Garish. Hal?
Hi there, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How are we doing?
Doing fine.
What do we know that's new, if anything?
I can't tell you anything real new at this particular point. I'm in the process of evaluating the information for our intermediate advisory that'll be out at 2 a.m. But I can tell you it's still moving in a general westerly direction toward extreme southeast Florida. It's a borderline major hurricane. That means problems.
What's the size of it now, Hal?
It's still a relatively small hurricane, even though it looks fairly large behind me on the satellite picture. But it's still packing tremendous power, and it may have a tendency to spread out a little bit in the next 24 hours.
Is it a force 3 or a force 2?
It's a borderline 2-3, and it could very well be a 3 on my next advisory. I want to evaluate this very carefully in the next few minutes.
I know that to the naked eye, it looks to me like it's heading more south.
Well, it is dropping a little bit in latitude as it progresses to the west. That's still a general westerly direction. It could even move a little bit more to due west in the next 24 hours. Sometimes hurricanes wobble as they approach land. I'm not sure whether this is general track or a little wobble that we're seeing.
And what's the speed of it now, Hal?
The winds are about 110 miles per hour. Could be a little bit stronger. We're getting a little higher information, higher wind speeds on our latest recon fixes.
And how fast is it moving this way?
Moving about 14 miles per hour toward the southeast coast of Florida.
Still holding at 14?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Thank you, Hal Garish, for the latest
Okay.
information from the National.
Said we'll be issuing that within the hour, and exactly what areas there. And these things are quite complex that we have to coordinate with the emergency management officials, many counties, states involved, and other areas like that. And so you start having these rumors flying based on our conversations that are taking place. So that's what we're really doing, working out the finer details of that warning
process. Can you
process.
give us an idea of the general area that this warning is going to include?
Well, it's certainly going to be in that watch area that we talked about earlier. We're going to try to narrow that down a little bit, and within the hour, we'll be coming out with that warning.
When exactly will you have this warning for us?
It could be, as I say, within the hour, maybe as early as 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a half hour from now.
Do you feel it's important to get this warning out earlier than you thought before, so people will know a little bit sooner what they should do?
You have such a complicated process that's taking place, then you start these rumors flying based on these calls that we make here, and so we'll try to get it out as fast as we can to make it fairly clear to what people need to do.
I know I've asked this.
Good morning. Hurricane Andrew continues on its relentless path towards South Florida. At this hour, hurricane warnings are in effect from the Vero Beach area southward through the Florida Keys, and a hurricane watch is on effect on the southwest coast of Florida up through the area just north of Tampa Bay. People in those areas should be prepared to take action at this time. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in
Hurricane warning from you. Now we are under full evacuation orders. Explain to us what's involved in that and who's involved.
Well, all those residents in the area that need to be evacuated, the mobile homes, all of those things that they have mentioned, it's time for those people to start moving, not thinking about that.
Again, we keep going back to this theme, but since it is so early in the morning and people are just waking up, we are looking at a very different storm than we had last night when we went to sleep.
As a matter of fact, the reconnaissance aircraft just came in with a report here that the pressure has continued to decrease. You see a little blow up of it here. Here's the eye of the hurricane right now, and this is the zone that's now approaching the Bahamas. This is now a 934 pressure, so that's the same pressure that Hugo had when it made landfall in South Carolina.
And remind us what Hugo did for those people who don't remember.
Well, up to the north of Charleston, what we had a Category 4 hurricane up in that area, it did considerable damage, 135 mile per hour winds. Now, we're getting close to that with this particular hurricane.
Have the winds gone up from your last calculations from the plane?
Yes, they have. The pressure there, they're going through and making a pattern through the storm at this time, flying back and forth through there. So we'll have better measurements here in a moment.
Is the storm actually getting bigger? It looks larger from where we're sitting. Is that just an optical illusion, or is it in fact growing in size?
Well, it's getting a little bit larger than it was 2 days ago, and yesterday it's getting a little bit larger at this time, but still not a big hurricane.
And again, when that thing hits the Gulf Stream, what do we expect to happen?
Going to continue to hold that strength and maybe up and down a little bit. But once you get to these strong hurricanes, it really doesn't matter. Bahamas right now, it's not going to be 6 hours. It's 6 hours before the core gets there, but you can see the fringe of the hurricane is now coming in. That's mostly cirrus cloud. Underneath that's rain bands, and that'll be coming across to Eleuthera and some of the easternmost islands of the Bahamas here in the next couple hours or so.
What do they see? Do they have rain, or do they have wind, or will the waves kick in first? What are the first signs?
The swells are going to be there, and of course the cloudiness, that's the cirrus cloud is already over there. So the cirrus cloud's there. The cloudiness is there, the swells are coming in, the wave action is coming in, and then the wind is starting to follow.
You know, islanders, it said, tend to be somewhat complacent. That's why they probably live on islands, kind of a relaxed lifestyle. You heard Michael Williams actually come out and say that they may be too complacent down there. At least that's the feeling he's getting from talking to these folks. Dr. Sheets, do you suspect that could be the case, and what would you say to these people?
Well, indeed, there's always a complacency factor. The fact that you have what you have right here and your ability to telecast into that area hopefully influences some of the things they do.
You know, we've talked a lot about storm surge, Dr. Sheets, and I think for some people it's still one of those meteorological words that we toss about that doesn't really mean anything. Try to inform us, maybe on more of a layman's terms, what we mean from your end when we say storm surge directly, concretely. What does that mean for people living in certain areas of South Florida and the Bahamas for that matter?
Well, it's a dome of water that'll be centered somewhere around the center of this hurricane, and the whole ocean comes up. We're talking about the whole ocean level comes up. In our case, it'll be around 10 feet, maybe 12 feet somewhere in Biscayne Bay, some of those areas. And then on top of that, you have wave action. So that's what the storm surge is. It will slowly come in over a period of hours, and then as the center approaches, then it may rise another 3 to 5 feet in a matter of 45 minutes. Just the ocean coming up with waves on top of that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but not only the water from the ocean, but also if you live close to like the New River or the Miami River, I understand in that area the surge would be higher as well.
Yes, it will be funneled somewhat up those rivers depending on where the center goes. If the center goes south of there, inland south of there, then it's going to drive the water up Biscayne Bay, up the rivers, up into higher areas into the inland.
Dr. Sheets, what about the bay specifically? A lot of people think, and maybe mistakenly, that that is a buffer zone, that they are protected because it'll hit the beach and then, boy, it'll be nothing after that. Is that the case at all, or are they being just downright silly?
That's the latter part. Then indeed, it's not a protection there. Certainly, it's better there than it is out on Key Biscayne as far as the water is concerned, or down in Elliott Key. But when that water rises about 10 feet, it doesn't know that the flats are out there, for instance. It just drives that water on ashore.
I heard some people talking last night at dinner who said they've got boats in the water. They think that this is no big deal, and actually they're looking forward to it. They're taking their cameras out, and they just think this is going to be a whole bunch of fun. Not the case, I would imagine.
I would hope not. We lost 5 people in Hugo in South Carolina who decided to stay on their boats, and we're not talking about small craft. One was a 45-foot trawler, another 40-footer, and another with a sailboat, and so they decided to ride the storm out, and we lost their lives. So I hope that people are a little more prudent in this area.
All right, before we leave you, Dr. Sheets, let's get the final incidentals on this. 120 miles an hour, moving something like 14 or 15 miles an hour due west, and it is heading in our direction. Anything you'd add to that?
It's a little stronger now. The pressure's dropped, and so the winds are coming up, and we'll probably have a Category 4 hurricane as soon as we analyze the wind field here.
So that's not only a probability, it looks like it's almost a definite kind of thing. Yes. You're just waiting to get the actual confirmation.
Right.
Force would hit Hugo, is that right?
That was the strength that Hugo was, yes.
All right, Dr. Bob Sheets joining us.
Bob Sheets, take over here for just a minute or two.
Good afternoon. Hurricane Andrew continues on its course toward the southwest to southeast Florida coast at this hour. The aircraft is now reported the pressure is now dropped to 922 millibars. Winds are now near 150 miles per hour, estimated at the surface. The eye of that hurricane will likely move across somewhere here in South Florida sometime in the early morning hours tomorrow. I'm Bob Sheets from National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables. Good afternoon. Hurricane Andrew continues on its westward course at 16 miles per hour, maximum winds of about 150 miles per hour. It's now thrashing its way through the Bahamian Islands at this stage, will be affecting South Florida sometime late tonight or early tomorrow morning. The center of the hurricane will likely cross the coast somewhere in southeast Florida here, somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, maybe as early as 6 a.m. Hurricane warnings have now been issued for southwest Florida from Venice southward through Flamingo. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
We'll get back to that in just a moment. We're going to get the latest from the Hurricane Center right now.
Is now having impacts into the Bahamas at this stage. The Hurricane Center is now located about 250 miles east of Miami. The impact area looks most likely in the Dade and Broward areas of Florida within the next few hours. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida. Well, it's near Eleuthera Island in the Bahamas. Right here over my shoulder, you can see the eye of the hurricane wobble just by Eleuthera Island. They reported 120 mile per hour winds, and that's on the weak side of the hurricane. On the north side of that hurricane, it has winds of about 150 miles per hour. It looks like now the center will pass inland sometime near dawn in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area.
And what do you think will be the course of the hurricane?
Well, as it goes across the Florida Peninsula, of course, we're going to have significant damage here in Miami-Fort Lauderdale area, and then continue on to the west coast of Florida, and then out into the Gulf over the next 2 to 3 days.
Is there any chance that it could deviate from that course or diminish in strength?
I think right now we're looking at what we call a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, so that's near the top of the scale. 5 is the strongest, and we're right near that. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of change in the intensity. As far as the course is concerned, it seems to be pretty solid, at least through the next 12 to 24 hours.
Bob Sheets, Director of the National Hurricane Center, thank you.
Here and to Y100 to hear that. Here's Bob Sheets right now.
Course towards South Florida. The center of the hurricane will likely pass across the Dade, Broward area sometime near dawn in the morning. You see the eye of the hurricane in here on our satellite imagery. It's now located about 200 miles to the east of Miami. Some of the outer bands are approaching our coast at this time. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
Thank you for taking the time with us again. I know you're a very busy man tonight. Now, you, in addition to being quite an expert in weather, are also, or have become quite an expert in evacuation paths, in the major population centers, also in architecture. One of the plans, I know, is to evacuate up. You're about to take a hit from a very strong, a direct hit from a very strong hurricane. Is up an alternative in this case in Miami Beach?
Well, we talk about what we call last resort refuge, not really evacuation, vertical evacuation, but last resort refuge in situations where you get trapped. And so if you do get trapped on the Florida Keys, barrier islands, then you take refuge above the storm surge level and in the interior rooms, maybe the second floor.
Now, I know for the past some years, you've been the director there. You perhaps have been called Chicken Little at times because you've been saying, and your colleagues have been saying, that the big one's coming, the big one's coming. And indeed, here it is tonight. We are waiting on it. We're already seeing some effects of it. Is the area prepared? Is the United States prepared? The Southeast Coast prepared for this?
Well, I think we're certainly much better prepared than we were a decade ago. Neil Frank started a lot of this several years ago. I've continued that, and had it not been for those actions, we would not have been prepared for this. Are we totally prepared for a hurricane like that? No way. I don't think anybody can prepare for a major hurricane, Category 4, Category 5.
It's been a couple of years since I've been there, but as I recall, you're on the 6th or 7th floor. You're the only floor on that building that has hurricane storm shelters on your, or storm flaps on your windows. Have many more been constructed lately?
No, we have the shutters all the way around, so we're sort of encapsulated, and now I think we have them closed all the way around. I'm looking at the last two windows. Perhaps we've kept those open until we see the wind start to pick up. So, yes, we're encapsulated here, and we'll ride it out right here.
Okay, we stay here in the safety of Atlanta, Georgia. We'll be keeping in touch with you, of course, and we wish you the best of luck.
Let's go to Bob Sheets right now for his update. Bob?
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues on its path towards the southeast Florida coast at this hour. The center of the hurricane is expected to cross the Dade-Broward area sometime between 6 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Winds are now about 145 miles per hour and expected to maintain near that strength as it crosses the coast. I'm Bob Sheets from National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
We have to go right now to
Sheets.
Bob Sheets. Join him.
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues to move on its course towards southeast Florida. At this hour, the center of the hurricane is located about 170 miles east of Miami. The center of the hurricane is also showing some signs that perhaps the winds may be decreasing slightly. Some increase in strength may be possible, some decrease over the next few hours. On our radar, we're seeing the eye of the hurricane now coming here through the Bahamas. The outer rings have already moved across our coast here with some of the rain bands here. The core of the hurricane, the stronger part of the hurricane, will be approaching the coast sometime after midnight tonight. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
Sheets on the line with us to give us an update. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
All right, what's the latest information you can give us right now?
Well, the good news is you see the eye of the hurricane seems to be filling right there, and so we seem to be going through one of those weakening cycles, maybe 10 to 20 miles per hour that we've talked about earlier as these eye walls contract and expand, and hopefully that 6 to 12 hour cycle will continue as we approach our coast. If that happens, maybe we can get this down to a Category 3 hurricane.
Is this a lot of people just thinking good thoughts, Bob, or is
well,
this...
it's certainly my wish, and hopefully that's the case, but the recon wind data we're getting is confirming that that's exactly what is happening there.
So what does that mean, Dr. Sheets, in terms of that kind of lessening of wind force and strength? Can we expect that we're not going to have quite as significant damage, or what?
Well, if we get it down to Category 3 instead of a Category 4, that means considerably less damage than the 4 would create. Now, we're going to be moving over the Gulf Stream here, the warm waters, and we may come through that upswing cycle again. These things go through these cycles. It may come through an upswing cycle again.
All right, Bob, thank you very much. We'll check back with you. Well, we're still looking at an arrival of the storm here, talking about the arrival of the center of the storm here around sunrise tomorrow, although the winds will be increased. Now live at the Hurricane Center.
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues to move on its westward course towards southeast Florida. The eye of the hurricane is expected to cross the Miami area somewhere around 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. The outer bands of the hurricane are now coming across South Florida. Those continuous bands, heavy rain, strong winds will be moving across the coast here around 2 to 3 a.m. this morning. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida. I'm here.
We're keeping the Miami radar up continuously here as much as we can because I can't think of anything else that impresses on people that the storm is on our doorstep at this point. And if anybody has any last thoughts about finally getting off the beach or whatever, hopefully this will motivate them. We're seeing on the Miami radar, the live Miami radar, those yellow severe thunderstorms in that outer band. What kind of winds that can we expect in there?
Well, the airplane shows about 75 to 80 mile per hour winds in this outer band right out here.
Bob, tell me that once again. I'm sorry, you were stepped onto my ear.
In this here outer band here, the airplane is showing about 75 to 80 mile per hour winds, and those bands are coming along here. And then, of course, in here, that's the strongest part of the hurricane, right in the eye wall region, right around the eye there.
All right, we can see, if we can put up the live Miami radar, I know that you can't see our shot, but you're looking at a different thing there. On the west side of the eye, in other words, our side of the eye, we are seeing a semicircle of, looks to me like a VIP3 there, at least. Of course, it's a long way out. That is indeed the eye wall, is it not?
This one out here, the VIP3 that you're seeing all the way out here, that's getting fairly close to the coast here. The eye, that's some distance from the eye wall.
No, I'm talking about right around the eye. We can see a semicircle of at least VIP3 and some VIP4 in there, right around the eye itself.
That's the bigger eye there, that the about 20-mile kind of diameter of eye that you're seeing in there, and that's what you're seeing out there at a distance of about 130 miles or so.
All right, so the outer fringe there, where we're getting, I assume, tropical storm force winds in that first band that's approaching the coast. What do we have, about 15 or 20 miles offshore now? Is that about where you figure?
The outer fringe, yes, and about here 50 to 75 miles from the coast, that's where we're going to see those near hurricane force winds as those bands come across.
All right, so we're talking about 3 or 3.5 hours for that, based on a 15 or 16 mile an hour movement.
Somewhere around 2 a.m.
Okay. All right, Bob, once again, thank you very much, and we'll stay with you as long as we can here. All right.
We got
Dr. Sheets, do we have Dr. Sheets at the National Hurricane Center?
I'm here.
Okay, Dr. Sheets, the man who keeps going and going and going. Are you still expecting about 8 to 10 inches of rain?
No, we're around 5 to 8. I don't know where we got the 8 to 10. I think that somebody had a typographical error on that. No, about 5 to 10 inches of rain at a maximum. And we've seen the forward speed of the storm increase slightly in the last few hours, and so that means that we may even have slightly less rain, because the faster it moves across us, the less time it has to rain on us.
Just out of curiosity, how do you measure rain when a lot of it's going to be going sideways with these very high winds?
Very carefully. Actually, there are gauges that try to measure that, and you look at area kind of rainfall there. Probably not all that accurate.
I know that we're just about to get into the heaviest activity right now. I was mentioning just a moment ago that these conditions where the spiral bands are coming through, the rain comes and goes, the wind goes up, the wind goes down, that's about to end pretty soon, and we're going to get into a more consistent type of weather. Is that about to happen just about momentarily now?
Yes, Gary, it is. As a matter of fact, the winds here in our building, I've been watching those change there. Right now it looks like about 30 knots, gusting up to about 40 knots on the roof of our building right now. So that's around 30 knots would be around 35 miles per hour, gusting up to about 45 miles per hour. And so they've been going up, edging up 5 to 10 miles per hour about every half hour or so.
Now, earlier today, you sent some of your staff to Washington as a backup to your location there in Coral Gables. Do you have a feeling that you might need to use them, or do you anticipate staying up?
Well, I just don't know. That's we're going to suffer the impact of the heart and core of this hurricane, because the center now looks like it's going to go inland over the Homestead, Cutler Ridge, Florida City area sometime around 6 to 7 a.m., maybe even slightly earlier than we thought earlier, of 8 o'clock and then maybe 7, but somewhere in the 6:30 to 7 a.m. Kind of time frame. And that means the strongest winds are on the north side, which is right here, Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, Key Biscayne, Miami Beach, right on up into South Broward.
Do you have a generator there in your building?
We've been using the generator for some time, so we have not trusted what's going on with power outside of this building. We have 2 generators. I'm looking at the light on it running there right now, so we've got one of them that's driving our power.
Very good. And one last question regarding the long-range future of Hurricane Andrew. You mentioned to me earlier this evening, it looks like the Gulf Coast is a potential area where it might go. Are you still thinking that?
Yes, we are. Now, I think the emphasis we need to shift to the Marco Island, over into that area of Naples, Sanibel Island, on up into the Fort Myers area, that's going to have this hurricane moving across there in this morning and today. and then out over the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll have another day or two to look to see exactly where it's going to go, but will threaten somewhere in probably Louisiana or Texas.
Well, more people then need to be very concerned about Hurricane Andrew.
How are you?
Hi.
Listen, I would like really to get a good view of what we can expect now. It's only 60 miles off. What's happening right now, and what can folks expect?
Well, the storm is moving ashore here. I was just looking at our wind instruments here on the roof. Right now we're getting a little over 40 knot winds there, so that's about 50 miles per hour in wind speeds. I just had the reconnaissance aircraft information handed to me. The pressure about 936. That's a little less than it was before. Sustained winds probably 130, 135, maybe slightly stronger than that.
We've been getting some calls from
watching WFLA TV, News Watch 8, Channel 8 in Tampa. We're carrying live the WTVJ coverage from Miami. And of course, Dr. Sheets is talking to us now.
There's a rain band there. Here's one that's coming across. And so, when those rain bands come across the areas, they'll bring those strong winds to the surface. We were marking here just a moment ago, we're not seeing as many of those rain bands as I would expect. They don't seem to be as strong in this hurricane as I would expect, and that would be good because that does not bring the stronger winds to the surface.
I notice, I don't see, as you mentioned, so many spiral bands, but I do know in those spiral bands we have a lot of tornadoes. Have we had many reports of tornadoes?
No, the only thing we've had was a report earlier of a funnel cloud, and I think that was sort of dismissed looking at the radar. We just weren't able to confirm that. If we get some tornadoes here, the most likely they would occur in these outer parts of the hurricane, and they would also not be the variety that most people are familiar with in the Midwest.
Bob, we talk so much about the eye and when that's going to hit landfall. When can we expect to feel some of these sustained winds that exceed 100 miles per hour?
Well, that'll be in the eye wall region right here. You see this zone right here, the eye wall region. That's when you'll get those strongest winds, and when we're going to expect that is probably about 6 a.m. this morning, going through about 8 a.m. or so.
If you look at this picture, Dr. Sheets, it seems that this is a lot drier than some of the others we've known. Is that correct or not?
Yes, Bob, that's what we're remarking about, the fact that there don't seem to be all that strong of rain bands in this hurricane, and it's not only the dryness or wetness there, but it's also the fact that strong rain bands, cellular activity, thunderstorm activity is what brings the strong winds to the surface, and that's usually where the swaths of damage occur.
Now, what can we expect now as far as being in the storm? How long do you think we will be in it, and when do you think we will be out of it?
We are now in the storm in the sense that the fringe area is moving across here with the 40 mile per hour wind sustained, and occasionally gusts up there about 50 now. Now, as far as hurricane force winds, I thought we were going to have those right now, but these rain bands are not persisting there. Now, when we're going to get out of that, probably about midday tomorrow.
Is this continuing to weaken right now? Again, we talked about this before. It keeps, every time we look at it, it doesn't look as healthy as it did a few minutes ago. Is that pretty much the same right now?
No, it's holding pretty good there. In fact, the last reconnaissance report I just had handed to me a moment ago, the pressure had actually gone down again. It was 936 as compared to 941 on the previous one, and they also had 132 knot winds. That's about 150 mile per hour winds. I believe it was on the north or east side there as they went through the center of the storm. So those winds are still there. We have a couple of radars that we're looking at, one that's over my shoulder. We have the new Doppler radar out of Melbourne, and the eye is well defined, and that's a long way away from where that radar is located.
Who's in trouble once this gets across the state of Florida?
Then southwest Florida, that's the Naples area, Marco Island area, Sanibel. Those areas need to certainly be nearing completion in any preparation activities that they're going to do. And then out into the middle Gulf, and certainly possibility in Louisiana, Texas area.
Advisory.
Good morning. Hurricane Andrew now nears the shore of southeast Florida at this hour. The center of the hurricane is located about 40 miles due east of Miami. The eye of the hurricane will move on shore within the next 3 to 4 hours across South Florida. At this time, winds of now about 130 miles per hour sustained. I'm Bob Sheets from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida.
Hurricane Andrew is continuing on track. It's a little more than an hour away from landfall here in southern Dade County. The eye has opened up a little bit more. The winds are down category 3 to 4 now, but it's still maintaining its track headed for southern Dade County.
All right, that's what we're getting.
Likely, of course, this is what we're seeing at the National Hurricane Center.
Brian, we want to remind the folks that we're trying to get Bob Sheets of the National Hurricane Center. You can see the picture from there now, but we're trying to talk to him.
Up, please. This is the most important thing, and as we get Dr. Sheets on the phone.
Hey, Brian.
Hi, Bob. We were watching as apparently you lost the radar.
Yes, we're right in the eye wall right now, and we had a gust of 152 on our roof. We're getting sustained somewhere around 115 to 120.
All right, I can tell you, and I don't know if you were watching the radar in detail, the live radar at the moment that happened, but of course we can locate you exactly with our radar sweep.
Right.
And based on what we were seeing, of course there is some ground clutter involved, you appeared to be at the very northern edge of the eye wall.
Right, we're right in the eye wall there. We've got our other radars working, our Doppler radar out of the Cape. Yeah, we're watching that. We still have that operating, but we've had to shut down some of our equipment. Of course, then our radar went out. And the building is shaking right now, as a matter of fact.
Is that right? Well, the band, a core band of winds that we've talked about.
Yes.
And that yellow band that we've talked about, you appear to be at the very top of that band.
Yeah.
And it extends down through South Miami and into Kendall.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of damage taking place out there right now.
Because the eye of the storm, as we're looking at it right now, is just coming ashore at Cutler Ridge. I'm looking at a live West Palm Beach radar.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if do you have access to that now?
No, we don't.
Right.
Yeah, how precise that'll be from there, you may be off.
Maybe off a little bit, although I can tell you that we switched over immediately and it agreed very, very closely with the Miami radar before it went out.
Okay.
So I mean, the same, because we use exactly the same base map here.
Mm-hmm.
So the lineup seems to be perfect, although for some reason the eye does seem to be a little smaller. But I think that I can fairly assuredly tell you that. The other thing I can tell you out of the West Palm Beach radar is that there is a very intense, and maybe you can see this out of Melbourne too, intense band about to come into Broward County, into northern Broward County.
Yes.
And we're getting reports in Broward County of people thinking that they're out of the storm.
Right, well.
and we want to assure them that they're not.
Okay.
All right. If you don't have anything to add, I'm sure it's frantic there, and we'll just let you go. Is there anything that you want to go ahead and say? Because we are still on the air on television and radio, and I understand we are one of the few outlets that is on the air.
Well, the main thing here, Brian, is the fact that we were a little surprised at how the winds were not increasing. But once that eye wall got here, it's extremely strong, and so those people looking over into the Kendall area and right on west and even into Everglades City and those regions over there need to take this storm seriously.
All right. Well, we'll assume that everyone is okay there. They did lose a window. All right. Well, obviously they've got some frosty soda. Bob Sheets likes frosty root beer. Well, we've learned something here. And he's looking a lot better.
Well, we, of course, don't have any way of measuring that at this time, but I'm sure it's lost a little. But you see here how narrow this is right here? And it's going to just pop right off here, and it's out over the open water again. And,
he does not know he is on the air.
Yes.
Apparently he's just having a conversation with someone there. If there's any way we can let him know that we have him up.
The warnings on the West Coast that'll be here through the morning hours and then out over the open Gulf.
All right. Well, maybe we can try and get Bob Woods on the telephone down there and just see if maybe okay. All right. Well, let me tell you what he was discussing there.